this is going to be an overview of the resume writing intervention for the Career Advising Services program at African Bridge Network. My name is Lauren Padula. I am a career advisor, and I will be going through this presentation, which hopefully will clarify a little bit about what we're looking for when it comes to the resume. So this is resume writing sections to include and tips on proper formatting. So just a overview of the sections that we will be covering in this presentation. We have them listed here on this screen, and so they will be and include contact information, professional summary, key skills, professional experience, additional experience, education, and professional development. So we're going to break it down into each of these sections and go through them one by one. Okay, so starting with the contact information, this is pretty self-explanatory, but it's also very essential. So when we're talking about contact information, what really is the most important thing to remember is consistency. Really, consistency throughout the whole resume is important. But when it comes to the contact information, we want to be sure that the email that we're using, the phone number that we're using, the home address is all going to be the same on any sort of correspondence that we have with employers. So that could be on the resume, future cover letters, email correspondence that we have. So of course, the consistency is really important here. So some things and tips to remember is making sure that you have an accurate location. Now, your exact home address is not always essential. That's really up to you if you want to include it, but making sure that you have the city, the zip code, and the state that you're in. Listing one phone number where employers can reach you directly is really important. Sometimes we've received resumes where there's multiple phone numbers, and that can be a little bit confusing as employers don't have the time to call all of the phone numbers to try to connect with you. So making sure that you have one phone number listed, that is the best number to reach you. And on that phone number, making sure you have a professional greeting in voicemail, so that if an employer tries to reach you and you are unable to speak with them, they hear your professional message and they know that they can leave you a message and get back to you. And hopefully you'll get back to them. Professional email, very similarly, we want to be sure, I will show an example of this in a moment, but making sure that it's very clean and concise. So no nicknames, no date of birth in the email, and it's good practice to make sure that it's either a Gmail or .net. So anything like .com, gmail.com, verizon.net, those are more than appropriate to use here. And underneath all of that information, sometimes we see fully work authorized, no visa sponsorship required listed. Again, that's a personal preference. It's optional. It's not something that you essentially need to include in this section. I will say, though, that open to relocation, if you are out of state and applying to a job somewhere else, it is very helpful for employers to see that you are open to moving if that is something that is relevant to you and your job search experience. Okay, so just to go through this a little bit more with examples, I have here a what not to do versus a what to do when it comes to contact information, do's and don'ts. So in this first example, which I have highlighted here in yellow, like we talked about in the previous slide, here you can see that there's two phone numbers listed, as well as an email that includes what looks like an abbreviation of the last name and potentially a birthday with the 519. So not as professional looking, and with the phone numbers too, we want to be sure that only one is listed. So when you look to the second example below, this is what we're really aiming for. First name, this person happened to include their street address. As we said, that is not required. It would be more than appropriate to just have Chicago, Illinois, and the zip code. Then we have the one phone number listed, the one email listed, first and last name, and then at gmail.com, very clean. And then this person also decided to include the fully work authorized, no visa sponsorship required, and open to relocation. But as I mentioned, that last piece is optional. Okay, so once we get through that first section, the contact information, we move into the Professional summary. So I like to say that this professional summary section is really your pitch to an employer and really highlights right off the bat who you are as a professional. So some tips to include before we go into another example is you want to be sure you identify who you are as a professional with your title. It is really important to include on average years of experience that you have in that specific field, and then specialty or technical skills. So again, we have an example to see kind of what we're looking for. And in this first one, the what not to do. Now, this isn't something that it definitely includes pieces of the professional summary that are good, but it's just not specific enough. So I'll just read this through. I have worked in HR for the past few years where I have developed skills that I know will make me a great fit for the position in recruiting at your company. Again, it definitely has some components of a good professional summary, but it's just not specific enough and a little vague. So when we go to the section below of what to do, this is a really great example. Human resources professional, so listing your title, with 5 years of experience in performance management, HR policy development, and recruiting for the telecommunications industry. So what's really great about this is, of course, it lists who you are and your specific title. It lists the years of experience that you have, and it also lists some technical skills. So a skills section is, we'll get into that in the next part of this resume review, but it is good to list it in the professional summary as well, because employers want to see as much clarity as they can immediately, and it's really helpful to have that listed right off the bat. So this is really what we're looking for. Again, I will show at the end of this presentation an example of what a really strong resume looks like so that you can see all these pieces put together. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are now moving into the third section of the resume, which is key skills. So this is a very important part of the resume. And the reason for that is because this is going to list your technical skills. And the reason that I say technical skills is because we want to avoid the soft skills that sometimes we see on resumes. Now, soft skills are usually more descriptive, and they could be things such as a team player, or well organized, all things that are great, especially when you are communicating your work experience in an interview, but they're not really essential to list, and they don't really speak to the skills that you have because of the field that you're in. So you really want to highlight your most desirable features to communicate with an employer, the value add you'll bring. And I have here linked a list of key skills by industry, which I will share in a moment. So really the focus on this section is the technical skills. So depending on the industry that you're in, the field that you're in, those technical skills are going to vary across those industries. So we want to be mindful of not only the technical skills that we do have, but also the technical skills that are listed in the job description for the job that we're applying, because that's going to show the employers that you might be a really good match for that position. So what I'll do here is I'll open up this key skills section and we'll transition a little bit into, actually I have it open right here. Okay, so just as an example, this key skills resource is really helpful for reference. So I'll just go through a few examples. If you are someone that is in the accounting or auditing field, you can see here, including technical skills such as QuickBooks, Excel, payroll software, nonprofit accounting, bank reconciliations, account payable, creating financial reports, the list goes on. Now, if you are someone that works in the healthcare field, your technical skills will be a little bit different. So this may look like diagnosing specific illnesses, performing certain surgeries, vaccination, proficiency to coordinate these vaccinations and health education campaigns, using anesthesia or special medical equipment. And let's do one more. So let's say you are in the nonprofit field. This could look like you have the skill of grant writing, fundraising research, cultivating donors, direct service, outreach, public relations, corporate sponsorship. Again, these are really great things to include in that key skills section because it tells the employer right away the value add that you're going to bring to this particular job. Okay, so let's go back to the PowerPoint here. Just as an overview, the difference with soft skills is that they're pretty descriptive, and these will be skills that come through during an interview. So it's really not essential to add them on their own in the resume itself. So the examples could be team player, well organized, problem solvers, or results oriented. Versus technical skills are more specific to the industry, and that could be things like we just discussed in that key skills resource. Things like project management, account reconciliation, systems integration, languages, or specialized computer skills. And the technical skills you'll include in this section are very dependent on your industry and your experience. Okay. And just to kind of go a little further with the soft skills, soft skills can be listed as an example of your professional experience, which we'll get into in the next section. So for example, instead of saying you are a team player, in your professional experience, when you start to talk about actual jobs that you've held and what you did in those positions, you may start to allude to some of these soft skills that you have in those descriptions. So for example, led a team of 5 staff members to create new organizational values. That really shows, without being listed as a skill in itself, that you're a team player and that you're able to work as a leader in your field. Okay, so moving forward into the 4th section, this is the professional experience section, which I really see as the body of the resume. So this is the most extensive section. And really, again, we want to focus on formatting here and consistency with that formatting. So I'll clarify a little bit what that looks like in some examples, but we're focusing here on job titles and the time frame in which you held this position. So making sure that you list the month and the year in the same format, where this title, this job position was, and what did you do, and how did you do it? So we'll get into more specifics about that. You really want to begin each bullet point with a strong action verb. Avoiding phrases like responsible for or worked, because those can get very redundant. Be sure to add descriptors and quantifiable outcomes to demonstrate these results. So employers really like to see numbers. So anywhere that you can be specific in the outcomes and how you actually were responsible for some of the outcomes in this particular job is so helpful to include here. So if you were working in IT, for example, or website design, one of your job descriptions might say something like this example: increased web traffic by 35% by optimizing the website and adding a PayPal feature. It's very specific, and it lists those quantities and those numbers. So anywhere you can put a number or a percentage is going to be very helpful. It just adds more of that specificity and clarity. Okay, I will hold off from showing this example resume, which we'll get to at the very end. So we'll move forward to the additional experience section. So this section comes right after the section of the professional experience where you listed all of the jobs that you've held. Now, what I want to mention too about that is we may have a very extensive years of experience working. Now, just because we were working for many years doesn't necessarily mean that we want to include every single one of those jobs in the professional experience section, because they may not be relevant anymore to the job that we're now applying for. So really listing, it'll vary from client to client, but really listing the most relevant jobs that speak to the position that you're seeking at this time. So again, now there could be gaps in your professional experience. And so we really want to focus on being able to close some of those gaps and fill the story a little bit about what we've been doing in between. And that's where the additional experience section comes in. So this helps us accommodate for transitional periods of about 1 to 2 years in our careers, um, which may be times when we were working, but not necessarily in the field that we are now pursuing. We could also have been volunteering during this time. So, if we were working in what we might call a survival job, which is a non-professional job that we hold to pay the bills and to have a livelihood, um, this could be something that we list here. So let's just say we were working as a cashier at a local CVS, but we have experience working in IT, and now that's the field that we're um, trying to get back into. That time working as a cashier is still valuable, even if it's not, the career that we're pursuing at this time. If we worked there for about a year, that is something to include because it offers transferable skills such as customer service, time management, initiation, problem solving that are still very valuable to speak to. Um, this is not as extensive as your professional experience section. So if you volunteered or held a survival job, like I said, in that 1 to 2 year period, you may only have 1 or 2 jobs or volunteer experiences listed in this section. So it's relatively a shorter section. So 1 to 2 bullet points is really all we're looking for here. And this may not be for everyone. Not everyone will have additional experience to speak to or that they want to include. So this is very much dependent on the person and your unique experience. And again, I'll be able to show an example of what this looks like when we go through the sample resume, which we have another example here, so I'll keep going, but I will go back to an example at the end. After we have the additional experience, we want to talk about education. Now, this section of the resume, as you can see, it's nearing the end. So we're on the 6th section out of 7. But the thing with education is that this will depend on the person, just as the additional experience section does as well. If you are a recent grad and you have education in the US, but you don't have a lot of work experience in the US, I would actually recommend that your education section go right after your contact information, which would be the second section instead, right at the top of your resume. And the reason for that being is that employers want to see the experience that you have in the US. So if you haven't worked in the US, but you did go to school in the US, maybe there was a graduate program you did, that will be something that you would actually want to have closer to the top of your resume. But if school was a very long time ago and you have more experience working here, this education section would likely go more towards the bottom. So with the education, you want to list your degrees from newest to oldest in a reverse chronological order. You would probably avoid any high school or secondary degree or certifications in this section, really looking for more advanced degrees. Um, English classes can also be listed in this section, especially for recent immigrants to demonstrate language proficiency. And what's really important here is you want to include the description of the university. And you might, in that description, include the rankings of the university, where that university is. And the reason for that is because if it is a university outside the US, not all employers will be familiar with that particular institution. So it's just good practice to include a one-line description of that institution to, again, specificity is key and being overly specific will not hurt you. So it's just a good rule of thumb to include a description. You can also include information about any theses, honors, or awards. That's typically for more recent grads, but that can also be listed in this section as well. And I have an example here. So as you can see, this would be a good way of formatting the education. So here you have an individual with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. So you would want to include that degree. And then the year of graduation, so 2008. And then you have the location of that, where that degree was received. So here it's Baghdad University in Iraq. And again, it would be helpful to include a description of this university. So this individual listed that it is the largest, most prestigious university in Iraq with a robust engineering college program. So nothing too lengthy. It's very short and sweet, but it is very helpful to get a sense of this particular university. And then below, they list that they have an equivalent to a US bachelor's degree in the field from an accredited institution according to World Education Services evaluation available upon request. That, again, that would be something that not everyone needs to list, but if you think it's relevant to you, you can certainly include that bit of information as well. And then we get to the very last section. So this is the professional development section, which focuses on, just as it sounds, professional development. So anything in the last typically 5 years where maybe you received a certification, you took extra courses, or continuing education classes, professional organizations or conferences you attended, all of that can be listed in this section. So you would not necessarily include what's listed in the first section, which are English classes, survival job training, or any items that are a little bit more remote. So anything more recently that speak more to what you've been doing in addition to working in the field would be included in this section. So again, you want to be very descriptive. You want to also include the location and the years when you either completed this course or attended this conference. If it was a conference, you want to give the location of where that conference was held. And this is not the most essential part of the resume, so you want to be very discerning of whether or not it's needed to have this. So really only if you have space on a resume and you believe that it's absolutely relevant and recent to include, then I would say have that listed. But we want to be sure that our resumes are not too lengthy. Anywhere from 2 pages at the very max is typical of what we're looking at. Now, there is some variability depending on length of experience, but we want to be sure that our resumes are not too long and don't really exceed that 2-page limit. Okay, so we talked a little bit about formatting as we were going through each of the sections, but just as a overview, we want to be sure that this resume is really our ticket into an interview. So we don't necessarily want to include anything personal. Anything personal will come up in the interview with the employer as appropriate. So we want to be sure that we keep it very, very tailored to the job and to our experience. I don't think I mentioned this before, but we also want to be certain that we don't have any photos of ourselves on the resume. If you have a LinkedIn profile or a professional website, that could be something you share in the interview, or maybe you connect with certain contacts in the field over LinkedIn, but those kinds of things you don't need to have in the resume itself. It's going to be really just seeing it as this kind of ticket into an interview. So, like I said, 1 to 2 pages long. We're not looking at any sort of lengthy resumes here. We want to be sure that all of our information is up to date and accurate. Reverse chronological order, so making sure that our most recent experiences are listed at the very top, and then we go and work through our older experiences. Don't use any personal pronouns either. You don't need to use I or me, especially in those job descriptions. We want to be sure that we're avoiding that. And so just being sure that we are referring to sample resumes too. If you ever feel like you need to have that as a reference, this is why we're going through this so that you can use this as a resource as well. And also our career advising program has a full team of career advisors who work individually with our clients to help through this process. But these are just really important points to keep in mind as we go through it. Another thing to keep in mind is this applicant tracking system. So most resumes and job applications are scanned and evaluated by a computer. As much as we would like to think that someone is taking the time to sit and read through the resumes, it is most likely going through a system and not necessarily a person. That's not true all the time, but a majority of the time it is going through an online ATS system. So the reason this is important is because that's why we focus so much on formatting. These systems can be very sensitive, and if the formatting is off in any way, it can jumble our resume, and that will be a barrier for any applicant seeking in employment and pursuing a job. So we want to be sure that the formatting is in this particular way so that we can avoid it getting kind of flagged by these systems. And the other thing is that these applicant tracking systems are really only detecting these keywords. So when you are applying to a job and you see a job description, what's really good practice is to start to focus on what are the key skills that this job description is looking for. Because when we can compare our resume to the job description and try to match it as based on our experience, of course, with those key skills, the applicant tracking system will be able to pick that up and say, oh, this is a good resume, because they're detecting those skills. And that's when employers will be able to reach out to you. So formatting is very essential. And so we want to be sure that it is readable to these online systems. And just a few other tips for formatting, making sure that things are, of course, spelled correctly, that things are consistent. I can't emphasize the consistency enough. Doing a very standard font, whether that's Arial or Times New Roman, making sure the size is between 11 and 12 point font. No colors, black font is really what we're looking for. Consistent spacing throughout is very important. No tables or text boxes or any kind of columns. That's a big thing that we see as well when we get new resumes, is that sometimes the resumes are formatted in a way that it's separated into columns, and that can really change the formatting. So we want to be sure that we're avoiding that as well. No personal information, and no punctuation, because we're not writing a story here. We're keeping things bulleted and very straightforward. So there is no need for any sort of punctuation. And of course, when you end up finalizing your resume and saving it, you want to be sure that you save it in a format that is going to highlight when was the last time you updated this resume. So you can list your name, your last name, and then the month, date, and year. So for example, for me, I would say Lauren Padula resume, February of 2024. So I know that that's the most recent version that I'm working with. And then anytime you make an update, you'll just want to make sure that the date reflects that update so you know which one is going to be the most recent one. So what I will do now is go into a example here. Let's go to this one. So hopefully this will help a little bit more show an example of what all these sections look like put together. Now, just right off the bat, you can see that there are no text boxes, there are no photos of this individual. Everything is very much aligned, and I can tell right away that the dates are listed in all the same way. For the actual sections of the resume, they are bolded in print and underlined. So that's a really great way to just separate each of the sections. So just by looking at it without reading it yet, I can see that this is formatted very well. So the first section, the contact information, we can see that this person also opted to include their street address, which we know is not essential, really just the city and state and zip code. One phone number, a clean and concise email with first and last name, and also the fully work authorized, no visa sponsorship required. But again, this is your own preference if you feel like that is something you need to include, but it is not essential to have that. And then we move into the professional summary section. So human resources professional with 5 years of experience in performance management, HR policy development, recruiting for the telecommunications industry. Okay, this helps me if I'm the employer understand that this person is working in the HR field, has several years of experience, and has those technical skills of performance management, HR policy development, and recruiting. And again, if I'm going to compare this to a job description, maybe that job description is looking for someone that has HR policy development experience. So immediately I can tell that they may be a really strong candidate. And then we have the key skills underneath that professional summary section. So you can see there's a lot listed here. And so some of these, this will vary again, depending on your experience and depending on the job description. I would say I would really prioritize any skills that you notice in that job description that you have. Those would be the ones to include. So just some examples listed here: financial reporting and analysis, budget management, computer skills. That's always a really great thing to include here if you're proficient in Google platforms, Microsoft Office, or any other specific software related to the field. So this person has listed HR software, PeopleTalk. Okay. And then we move down to the professional experience. So I won't go through all of these experiences listed, but let's focus on the first one. So they have the title listed, Human Resources Manager, and they have the location in which they were working in that position. And so, as we talked about before, because this was in Zayn, Brazil, they have here, out of the US, of course, so they have here a description of what this company was, and they specify that it's a pioneer telecommunication company in Brazil with an active customer base of 12,900,000 plus employees. Really great to include that size of this company. It gives the employer a much better picture of what the scope of this position looked like. So numbers are key if you can include it. And then the dates as well that that person was working in this position. And then they have here the actual duties that they did in this position. A good rule of thumb: we don't want to have too many bullet points. We just want to be as clear and concise as possible. So I would say anywhere from 3 to 5 bullet points is really what we're looking for. You don't need to have anything more than that. Just really highlighting your key responsibilities. So the first one says managed HR department of a 400 employee site, and it supervised a team of 9 responsible for the training and development, recruitment, and employee benefits to improve employee satisfaction on annual survey by 10%. Great numbers. Really gives me a clear picture of what this person was responsible for. And the second one, created and led implementation of leadership development program to train 5 to 10 new team members a year and decrease employees' turnover by an average of 5% annually. Okay, also very clear, very helpful information. Okay, so they list here a few other jobs that they held, but what we notice is that the most recent job was 2015, and the last job they list was 2012. So in that 3-year period, those are the jobs that they're providing. We're not looking for anything really from 10, 15, 20 years ago. Now, again, it's going to be different for everyone. And sometimes there may be positions that do exceed that 5-year mark that might still be relevant. But we just want to focus on the jobs that are going to be speak to our experience, that are also most in line with what we're pursuing at this time with our careers. Then we get to the additional work experience section. So again, this is to help clarify As I said, the last position that this person held was 2015. So let's say I'm looking at this in 2017. I may be wondering, what has this person been doing since 2015? Okay, so then I scroll down and I see that in 2016 to the present, this individual was working as a volunteer interpreter at Global Sports Commission in New York City. And again, they list a specifier of what this was, translating, interpreting between Spanish, Portuguese, English as needed. Okay, so if I was kind of curious what this person had been doing since that last position that they listed, this is that section that can kind of clarify that for me. And they also list a survival job, so front desk clerk. Now we know that this is a survival job because this person is in the human resources industry. And so between 2015 and 2016, they were working in this position. And they list here that they provided advertisements of open houses to customers, resulting in 30% faster sales. So this is that section that really fills in the gaps of this individual's professional experience. And then we have the education section. So a Bachelor of Science in Management from University of São Paulo in Brazil, which was is the largest Brazilian university and country's most prestigious educational institution. This individual received their master's in 2009. And again, there's an example here of what because this is out of the US, it's helpful to include the descriptor that this is the largest Brazilian university. Just helps us get more information. And then they also decided to list that this degree is equivalent to US bachelor's degree in the field, which again is just helpful and good practice to list that as well. And then we have this last section, which is the professional development section. So human resource metrics, New York University 2016, advanced labor relations and employment law, New York University 2015. They list some certifications here. Some of those may have been some conferences attended, and all within that 3-year period between 2013 and 2016. There's one listed from 2012 as well. So within those recent years that overlap with this job experience, they're also listing some professional development that they engaged with, which is great. So this is really all that we are looking at with those 7 sections of the resume. This will hopefully be a good resource to refer to as we, move through our professional experiences. And I also like to share that it's helpful to have a master resume, so one that we're constantly working on. And then we can have individual resumes that are tailored to specific jobs. Having something that this is kind of like an active document that can always be modified. It's always changing. And having something that follows this format, having a resume that follows this format is going to be really helpful. And this really is, like I said before, that ticket into an interview and getting that call from an employer saying, we really want to talk to you and hear a little bit more about your experience. So this will conclude the presentation, and hopefully this will be a great reference moving forward. And thank you for listening.